Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Heysal podcast, live here from Rome, Italy. We have Shane Harnett here today as our guest. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for being here today. And we have Frank in the control room. Frankie, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks, guys. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm Sal. This is the Heysal podcast. Hit it! All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have Shane Harnett here today. He is a writer and an actor, and he's a man of many, many talents. I'm so glad that you're here. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Sal. You invited me quite a while ago, but for some reason or another, I've never been able to say yes. But
you're a busy man, I suppose.
Finally glad to be here today.
Yes, you're doing so many things.
I don't know if I'm that busy at the moment. I've got a little bit of time, so it's great to be able to come here today.
Well, I'm glad you're finally here. So yeah. What's new? What are you up to these days?
Well, I'm sort of taking a bit of a break at the moment. So apart from acting and writing and the kind of things I do with that, so I have a full-time job. So but I've been off for a month or so, but now I've got to go back to work pretty soon, unfortunately. But I mean, using that time to try and come up with a few new ideas, put some things down in paper, and then hopefully I'll be involved in one or two things in Rome this year.
So I saw that you wrote a few plays, for example. Like, let's start maybe with the most recent one, which is Maggie and Brigid, right?
Yes.
So how did that come about?
Well, I mean, I actually wrote the play itself quite a number of years ago. So okay. I wrote that in around 2013 or so. It was after my mother had come to Rome with my aunt and a few other ladies of a certain age. And my mother said to me, you know, bringing these ladies around, she said, you want to write a play about this or do something? And I said, no, I never could do that. Because I really thought it's maybe too personal, too close to the bone and that kind of stuff. But actually, about a year or so afterwards, an idea sort of started to form in my head about this relationship between two ladies. And it wasn't specifically based on any lady, you know, that I know, but right. More or less it was a relationship between different women. And what I found quite interesting is obviously they're women who are slightly older. And a lot of female actors often say that there's not enough parts for women, in particular a certain age and the like. So I thought I'll try and develop a story about these two ladies. And the sort of central part of the play is a bit of a road trip where they come to Rome. So the two Irish ladies, really. But I think, you know, you could play it sort of in different accents. They don't necessarily have to be Irish, but it's a kind of an Irish story. But it's quite a simple story at the heart of it. It's really about kind of, you know, friendship, about love, about loss, that kind of stuff, and hopefully it's quite funny. We put it on in April, and it got quite a lot of laughs. And
did your mom see the play?
Did who?
Did your mom see the play?
She didn't see it, unfortunately. My parents were in California at the time visiting the favourite son, so I missed out on this. No, I'm joking. My mother will be furious if she looks at this. She'll be furious that I said that. But unfortunately not. But hopefully, you know, we will put it on again at some stage. That would be the hope. So if there's anybody listening in who's a producer who's got a lot of money, who wants to help us sort of bring it to a new level, then that would be great. But I'd just like to thank as well the original producer Fabiano De Rosa, who did a great job in this, and all the other people who were actually involved, and Michael Fitzpatrick, the director, and of course the two great actresses as well, Sheila Stutchbury and also Maggie Davies. So they were the ones who really helped bring this together, and they did a great job.
So why would somebody do an English language play in Rome?
Well, there is actually a lot of English language theatre in Rome, and you consider Rome 3 million people, or if you consider the greater Rome area, about 5 million people, and right. There's literally tens of thousands of people who are in Rome who speak English as a first language. So there is actually an audience there for doing this kind of stuff. Right. And there are people who've been putting on, you know, shows for years. People like Sandra Provost, like Gabby Ford, who've done a really, really, really great job. So it's something that has been there for a long time. So it's certainly not something that I've been the originator of. But I tried to jump on the bandwagon as much as I could. There's many great actors in Rome. But probably one of the things that's missing is that most of the things that we do are sort of classics or things that you might see in New York or London.
Okay.
So
right.
hopefully what I'm trying to add is maybe some new stuff. So and I'm sure there's other writers out there as well who'd like to kind of get some new stuff on stage as well. So I think that's the interesting thing, and that's the lifeblood of any really great theatre. I think it's new work. Yes, being able to do the classics is really, really important, but new work is also just something that adds that little bit extra.
And what kind of audience do you get there? Because I was recently at a Louis C.K. Comedy show. And I'm not sure if you're aware of Louis C.K. and his controversy about it.
He's still let out, is he?
He's still banned from TV, I think.
Was he sharing a cell with Weinstein? Or
No, he was by himself. I mean, but he didn't really rape anybody or anything. He was a bit naughty and he did a few disgusting things. But as I understand, he was not really. But his show, I mean, most people there were expats, I believe. No, actually, sorry, I will take that back. I was surprised how many Italians went to the show. How many... because I suppose before I went there, I was convinced it was going to be all the expats going there, from all the people going to the comedy club from Arsha, or all these people, and they were there too. But it was mostly Italians. So what's going on at the theatre?
Yeah, actually, I mean that's true. I mean, a lot of the people who come to the English language theatre are Italians. They're people who love theatre or love any sort of live performances. Yourself, or a musician, and I think there is something different between going to see somebody play live, or somebody tell jokes live, or somebody act live, than something that's pre-recorded.
Absolutely.
It's because things go wrong. It's like this show. Obviously, this show is live.
It's real live,
and it's very exciting, to do.
One thing went wrong already, because since Frankie in the beginning stopped the original live stream, we changed the link. Even though I see that the people now are catching on to it, we changed the URL where you can see the thing live. But first of all, hello to everybody who's watching right now. You can also ask questions, by the way. We have a live chat on my left side, on your right side probably, where you can ask Shane questions, or me if you like. So so live, a lot of things can go wrong. Exactly.
Everything, which makes it more exciting. It also makes it more exciting for the actor as well, or the musician, or whoever. But it's something you have to. I think it's something you have to learn how to deal with. So when I used to act, and there's certainly a lot of much better actors than I am, but I used to always want to do a perfect job. I didn't want to make a mistake. And I think that makes you more of a nervous actor. I'd
say so. I mean,
it's a hard thing to do. Whereas now,
impossible.
I'm happier to make mistakes, if you like. It doesn't upset me as much. So it helps you kind of relax a little bit more on stage, and it kind of enjoy it a bit more, I think. So I think I've got to be to that level where I'm able to do that a little bit now, whereas before I used to find it quite difficult.
Probably you just got better, because when you are starting out, I suppose, then you want everything to be planned out, so you can basically prepare for every possible situation. But you will find out soon that that's not possible.
Yeah, of course.
Once you get good, I suppose you can play with anything, right?
Yeah. And it's a thing about doing live theatre is also is a massive, it's a teamwork thing. You have to really trust everybody, and that obviously it's not just the actors on stage. It's also the lighting people, the sound people, whatever.
Right.
Because you know that you're hoping that everybody knows when something goes wrong, so that somebody will be able to come up with some sort of genius sort of element that they're able to cover it and get everything back rolling again. And that's quite a hard thing to do, but it's the excitement of being on stage. And one thing I would say about what we do in Rome is that when we do a run, it's usually a week long. So we really do like 6 shows. Whereas if you go to London, they have all these shows that are preview shows, and literally it's maybe 2 or 3 weeks. So the actual debut of the show, the premiere, is maybe the Thursday of the 3rd week. By that stage, because they might have done, for the first 2 weeks also, there would have been a couple of matinee shows. So they might have done 15 or 20 shows by that stage, before the critics actually come in and say that this is a show now that we are able to write a review of.
Right.
So we never get that chance. And that's one of the things I feel like, for instance, with something like Maggie and Brigid, so something that's new, is that I could just feel the development of that and how it's getting better and better. And then, you arrive at a Sunday and that's it, and it's over. And that's one of the things I find really hard about Rome, that we're not able to be, simply because we just don't have enough people who are coming to the theatre.
So they limit the English-speaking plays to a week or so because they cannot afford the longer.
Absolutely.
Run
we don't really make money out of this. This is just all about trying to avoid losing money.
Right.
So it's really people who are doing it for love. But many of these people are trained proper actors. So these are real theatre people. But we know that living in Rome, that we're not going to be able to make money out of necessarily. So you do it for the love of it. And then if you can make money some other way, acting, like get a film part or voiceover work or whatever it may be, you can make money out of it that way, but not necessarily on stage. So it is really a labour of love.
Let's see, Mark Duggan. Do you know Mark?
Yeah, I do, yeah. He's my brother-in-law.
Okay.
What does he say?
Just wrote, here we go. Uncle Payne, could you write a new farce about your favorite football team?
Okay, so
right.
Uncle Payne.
Who's that?
That's my nephew Jamie. He calls me Uncle Payne instead of Uncle Shane, and he's a Liverpool fan. And I'm a Manchester United fan, so I think it's a little bit of a dig on my favorite football team. But
all right, Mark. So does it ever happen to you then, if you are an actor and you are called for a play and you go through the whole process, you maybe have to do an audition and you get the part, and then you see with who you have to play and you're like, that dick again, or that you have to play with people that you really don't like, or that or the light guy, as you said, is a really pain in the arse, and then doesn't it?
Not really. I don't think. I mean, I think certainly
that would be off-putting,
The people, well, certainly. I mean, the people in Rome. I sort of, I know a lot of the people who are kind of like he's been in the shows, and it's a very kind of, it's a small community, but it's a kind of community that sort of helps each other and looks out for each other. And obviously, there are people you get on better with than other people, but there's nobody I really ever had a bad relationship, I think. So I think I've always really enjoyed any of the plays I've been involved in Rome, and even before.
Do they ever tell you if there's somebody in the audience who's like writing reviews or something? Like, do you know beforehand that there's that guy? Because I remember I did theater a few times, very low level improv and stuff. I'm not very good at it at all. That's why I stopped. But it's like, tonight there's going to be this person or that person, and then either that person never arrived very often, or B, it just. Why are you telling me this, before the show? Well, because it makes me nervous. I get really nervous on stage.
Yeah, I can.
When I'm acting.
We know that. I mean, obviously, we hope people come to review the shows, because it also raises the profile, and it makes some people aware that we do this. Because there are people who, maybe expats who love theatre, have been in Rome for years, who don't really know anything about the shows we put on. So maybe they don't hang out in the sort of crowds where they meet these people, but anything that you can do that might be in, sort of an English-speaking sort of publication that they may read generally online now, or on Facebook or on a blog, or some way that it will sort of promote the show and talk about what we do, well, then that's great. Even if it's a negative review, I mean, obviously you always hope it's going to be a sort of positive review, but at least it makes people aware that that we're out there doing it. And sometimes if they give us a bad review, maybe it's a sign of respect as well. It's like we don't need a G up. I've seen some of your shows. We liked these other shows, so this show wasn't as good, or we don't. So it can be a good thing, a sign of respect. But it's always nicer to have a positive review, and it helps get bums on seats as well.
I mean, I guess every time you publish something, you put yourself on the line, so people will be judging what you do, whether it's somebody who's doing it professionally, or whether it's your partner. Like my girlfriend is my most professional, best reviewer. Like if I do something that start a new project or something she doesn't like she'll tell me brutally, honestly, that she thinks it sucks. I should not do that.
Well, and that's good.
And it's good. It's good though.
Yeah, it is good to have people who will tell you. I think you can. I mean, there's a way to tell as well. Some people are just cynical and negative about everything. So you have to have a way of telling people, listen, I like this bit of it, but I didn't like that bit of it. But I mean, personally, especially for the stuff that I write, I think I'm my own worst critic. But I also know what I want out of something, and that might not be something that people like. You understand that? And that's when it comes to artistic integrity. Sometimes it's like, yeah, you're totally right. That needs to change. That needs to change. Other times it's like, no, I'm leaving that line in. It's so important for me that line remains in. and you have to stand by that when you feel strongly about something. My thing is that not everything is something you need to feel strongly about.
Sure.
There's so many things you can easily say, yes, yeah, you're right. But there are certain things that, you know, makes you an artist or somebody who has artistic inclinations. When you have the ability to say no, even when everyone is telling you have to do it a different way. And that's when you realize that maybe you have some sort of belief in yourself.
You know what I find is very often I struggle to find people who actually criticize me honestly and say something is bad or could be improved, because people try to be nice. So I understand they're like, oh, this is great, or great, or don't even look at it maybe, or you just, you know, want to pat you on the shoulder. But really what makes you become a better artist or whatever you're doing is actually improving, because you know what, there's a problem and you know you can improve upon that problem. But if everybody's telling you how great you are or how great things are,
well, I mean, I definitely have people who will tell me honest things as well. So I mean, and obviously being Irish as well, it's quite. We don't give compliments very easy. We don't take them very easy either. I mean, I find one of the things I find after a show is when people come in. Very often people even come into the dressing room to say well done and stuff like that. I just want to close the door for a few minutes. I just need a few minutes just to kind of just breathe a little bit, and then maybe see a few people afterwards. But I find it quite difficult that bit after the show. Maybe the next day or something like that.
It's like the post-show adrenaline, or just
I think it's a bit of it's probably a bit of adrenaline and things like that. So you're not really listening that much. You're kind of like, thanks very much, thank you, You know, it's not really, you're not really taking everything in. So sometimes it's better the next day or a couple of days after, where you meet somebody, you know, for lunch or a drink or something like that, and they might tell you little bits that they liked or they didn't like.
I mean, it's understandable. I mean, you just, you know, probably all the adrenaline rushes through your brain, and you have to take in everything, the lights, the audience, the reaction, and you're happy that the thing went well, hopefully. And
well, I mean, that's kind of the way I feel about it. But some people love it. Some people, straight after the show, they just love the fact that people come in. And, you know, it's just different. It's a different way of looking at it. But but for me, I just like to take a little bit of a breather after a show.
I mean, you would not be a good football player then, like they do on TV, like after a football game, and then right afterwards they shove the microphone
during
in
half time as well. Like, you know, when they're coming off the pitch and they're at, you know, what are you going to talk about at half time? Well, I'm not going to tell you. Why would I tell you? I mean, it's getting a bit ridiculous now.
Oh yeah,
we're oversharing, maybe. You know, I think
maybe. By the way, James, thank you very much for the compliment. James Edgerton, a friend of mine, he just wrote a nice hat. Okay. The only reason I'm wearing this is because I was too lazy to prepare my hair properly.
Well, I was saying to Sal, I was saying to you off air, Rosa, my lovely other half, she was suggesting that I should wear a cap like that, and then she says, "Oh, but you'll probably take it off in the studio because, you know, whatever." And then I came in and I saw you wearing a cap like that. I should have brought it. You know, we could have been Snap, yeah. So, but anyway,
would have looked a bit more Irish too, because
it would have, yeah. That's very old style kind of, you know.
Maybe it's also
1940s fisherman kind of thing. Yeah,
my dad's Sicilian, so maybe that's also.
Yeah, that'll be it. Yeah.
Honoring him. So you're from Dublin, right?
Yes,
Dublin. So when did you actually come to Rome? Like, it feels like I know you forever. Yeah. And I don't even remember exactly where. I probably know where we met. I'm not exactly sure how. Probably was booze involved.
Well, yeah. So I moved to Rome in 2003, the beginning of 2003. So I was kind of here already in the summer of 2002. I was sort of scoping it out a little bit. But I'd lived in Italy before. So I did an Erasmus outside Milan, and a little university town called Castellanza. So I lived in a place called Busto Arsizio, which is
Busto
Arsizio.
Busto Arsizio.
Yeah.
I know where it is, but I'm gonna make a bumper sticker out of it.
Arsizio.
Arsizio, okay.
Arsizio.
Busto Arsizio says
there.
Okay.
But so like this town in the north of Italy had about 100,000 people and I think one hotel. So it was the least touristy town, I would say, in the whole of Italy. So industrial, northern town.
Not after this podcast.
But actually Mina, the singer, is from there.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but we had an amazing time. It was really, really, really fun. And then after I finished university, I went to Florence. I was there for almost half a year. And then I was lived in Turin for about 6 months. Then I went back to Ireland. I worked in publishing for about 2.5 years. And then I decided to move to Rome for about 6 months. And then I ended up spending about 12 years here.
Wow.
And then I left for almost 4 years. So I was in the UK, I was in Edinburgh for a couple of years, and then London for a couple of years. And then I moved back just under 2 years ago. So, on and off, I've been here, for, the last, in Italy since 97. So we're talking, 23 years, probably the last 23 years, about 15 of them I've spent in Italy.
Wow. So, we all have our own reasons why we're here, I suppose. But what's your biggest reason for coming to or for staying here or for returning in this case?
Well, for returning is because Rosa, the other half, so she came back. So it was at a stage where I was in London and she was here. So we had to decide whether we were going to be here or there, basically.
Right.
And then I got a job offer with FAO. So it's for those listening in English. Everybody's listening in English, obviously, but it's the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. So I took that and I moved back. So I've been working for them for the last couple of years. And I'm a consultant. So essentially, I have contracts and then the contract's up and then you usually have to take a break for a month or so. So I'm on a break at the moment, and I'll be going back to them probably at the end of the month or the beginning of February.
So one thing I wanted to talk about is Rusty Sings to Save the Ice.
Yes.
Which is your play you wrote, I think, a few years ago, right? And it was also, it came out a few years ago.
Yeah, yeah. This one I put on actually in 2009.
Because it's very, the topic is very...
It's interesting, and I didn't prompt you to say this, but I was thinking if this came up.
What you talking about? I was going to say. You handed me a 50 before.
I know what you're going to say because you know what I saw on Google the other day or something. You thought it came through Google. I don't know. I was looking for a theater or something somewhere, and I saw something about a theater festival that is dedicated to plays about climate change. And I wrote Rusty Sings to Save the Ice in 2007, 2008, and we put it on in 2009. And it's about the Emperor Nero coming back to save the world 2,000 years later from a climate disaster.
Right.
So I'm not saying that I invented a genre, but I certainly did
You
something.
didn't invent climate change?
No, I didn't.
Wait,
does it exist? But I certainly, wrote something, about something that wasn't topical necessarily at the time. I mean, Al Gore and a few people were talking about it, but it was still a niche thing 10 years ago or 12 years, 13 years ago. Whereas in the last few years, obviously, it's become massive. So now everybody's writing plays about climate change. Everyone's writing plays about sort of trans and gender fluid things,
right?
Which is probably it's the wrong time to write a play about climate change now, I would say.
Oh, you wrote it already?
I wrote it already, yeah. Right. So I can maybe resurrect it.
Yeah, did you think about it?
Maybe. I'd have to rewrite it a little bit.
Yeah, but I think it could be the right time to do it now.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think so. And it was a really fun experience, but I'd never really directed anything before. Certainly anything that was putting on in front of a paying public. Right. So I made a huge amount of mistakes, but also I learned a huge amount from it as well. And it was really fun. But I think I have a way of thinking of theatre, thinking of writing as well, where for me, rhythm and flow are really important. So I like things to flow a lot. And some great theatre it's very staccato, it's very boxy, it's in a room, but that can build up tension and it can be brilliant. So I'm not saying that kind of theatre isn't great, but it's maybe not the kind of stuff that I do or that I really like. It had a bit of movement in it, and that's the kind of way and I find it's very hard to write that way because usually you hit a block somewhere, so you really need to have a bit of luck in a sense where this just window opens and you're able to write and it comes out really, really quickly. And then you have to edit things, you have to make them better, and then you give it to an actor, and an actor goes, why am I doing this? I don't understand that. And then you realize, okay, yeah, it doesn't really make sense. And then, so you have to, you're always going to have to rewrite it slightly. But getting the main text down in the first place is in many ways, that's the main achievement. And then you can make it slightly better along the way. But it's always going to have something that ties the scenes together.
Do you ever feel like when you write a play that now I've finished it? Like, do you ever feel like now it's done? Or
no,
or you're just looking at the watch and like, okay, next week I have to have this done, because then I have to talk maybe to the producer to finalize things in the theater.
I'd never say that it's done, and especially again saying the way you put it on maybe for a week or something like that. That's if it was on in, say, on Broadway or something like that, it would probably have a run in some regional theater first, then go off Broadway, then have 3 weeks of shows, preview shows on Broadway. So and they would be doing little rewrites along the way, and it'd be getting better and better and better. Never really have time to do that. So I would never say that this is perfect and this is exactly the way I want it. But at a certain stage as well, you have to let it go. You have to say, okay, I'm going to give it now to these people, and they're going to put it on stage, these actors, and they're going to say it, and hopefully they're going to improve bits in it and find something in it that I didn't even consider. That's what you're always hoping.
Okay.
Excuse me, I've got a little frog in my throat.
So I saw on your blog, because you also have a blog here in Rome, you were writing about recycling. Is that something that has to do with the play, with Nero saving the world from the climate crisis, that they use technologies that maybe technologies they used back then that used to work?
Yeah, we have a place in Rome, Monte Testaccio, which is it's an old dump, but it's because of materials they were using. So they're using terracotta, ceramics, so it's earth. Right. So when they piled everything up there, over time, with rain and obviously as Rome was abandoned as well, these things just decomposed, and then flowers started growing out of them, and then trees, and it's an amazing kind of story. So if you use the right materials from the beginning, everything is kind of recyclable. The problem is we use a lot of materials that are like plastic, for instance, that are non-recyclable, and we've got to a stage where we can't really just continue to produce these things. Right. So we have to go think where we go from here, and how we design things in future, and what materials we use. And ancient Romans, but not just Romans, other ancients we can learn from.
Absolutely. I mean, they seem to have figured out something that we have forgotten today. And it's very interesting because at the end of last year, I went to a conference in Trentino. And there was a guy speaking, I think his name was Michael Baumgart or something. Like it was one of the guys who invented the concept of cradle to cradle. So it's a concept that brings recycling, elevates it to another level, where basically companies should design every single element within their products in a way that either they dissolve after they are done being used, or they become resources for something else to be produced. Yeah. And so that basically is what the Romans did back then. I thought when I read your blog, it's incredible.
Reuse. I mean, even the walls of Rome, recycling bits that were already there.
Porta Maggiore, like the old aqueduct, became a wall.
Exactly. You see all the aqueducts go, and that became the wall, and that became the walls of Rome. And they were always thinking that. They're recycled bricks. So if you look at the concrete, it's not the kind of concrete we have nowadays where it's all smooth and this liquid they pour. Right. It also has this aggregate inside it, which is bits of broken bricks and bits of loose things that were left around.
I think volcano elements are in there as well.
Exactly, yeah.
That it's particularly strong.
What we call pumice stone, pozzolana. So you have all these things that urine. I mean, they used to use that to wash their clothes. Yeah. Apparently, even wash their teeth.
Not sure how to do that.
Catullus,
not convinced.
Yeah, the famous poet has a poem about a Spaniard, and he sort of takes the piss out of him for having very clean teeth. Right. As you say, the Spaniards were famous for well, I don't know if this is true or not, but this is what the Romans used to say, that the Spaniards used to clean their teeth with piss, and that's why they're always so white all the time. But that's just, and then he was just saying that, but your breath stinks and you're horrible, whatever, you know. But you know, I'm not saying that we should be washing our teeth with urine, but we can definitely use it for other things, you know.
Right.
And I have seen there's beer companies now that recycle urine from pub toilets. And they use it as fertilizer because it's got nitrates in it and things like that. So you can use it to fertilize the soil in the same way you can use, you know, feces. And
well, that's I was about to say, that's one of the biggest resources we waste every day.
Yeah, we do. And so, but these are things, oh, we can't do that kind of stuff. But actually, people have done that for years, you know, for years, for millennia, we're talking. So we have to totally, you know, rethink how we live our lives. And also the thing about recycling, we also have to sort of think about why are we always talking about recycling? Maybe we use too much stuff. Maybe we don't need all this stuff in the first place. So, you know, the famous thing now is the different R's. So it's refuse, reduce, reuse, and then recycle. So what see, if you read in the media, it's always recycle. And for me, that's coming from somewhere. That's coming from the oil companies. They're the ones who are producing all these plastic. And they say, now we're recycling all this to make it as if like recycling is the highest thing that you could possibly do. Right. It's actually the lowest part of that chain. So recycling it's better than doing nothing, but it's not great really, to be perfectly honest.
Oh yeah, it just postpones the problem really. Like if you would use this cradle to get back to the principle and build something in a way that it automatically becomes a resource once you're done using the item, then it's great because something becomes an endless resource and it will never be thrown away really because it's always reintroduced into the next product cycle, whatever that is.
And that's what we should always try and be doing. But also we got to be careful about things, you know, in terms of packaging, and people say, no, it's biodegradable and everything like that, because most packaging is not fully biodegradable. In the sense
I heard about the shopping bags here in Italy. Now they are made of mice or something, but then they made the tests and they don't really dissolve and birds eat them and they still die
and that's
horribly.
The thing. So a lot of stuff that is biodegradable is not actually biodegradable, or sometimes it's biodegradable in the sea, but it's not in the soil. So things that are 100% biodegradable, we still probably haven't mastered that yet. But I think, you know, there's so much money out there, and there's so many. We have trillionaire companies now. I mean, why aren't they doing stuff like that? I mean, I saw Ricky Gervais at the Golden Globes.
Oh yeah, did you see that? That was amazing.
Yeah, and he said something about Tim Cook and Apple and whatever. You know, he more or less called out their hypocrisy.
Congratulations, I think it was for the actors that are now on Apple TV, and he said congratulations for the new release of the show. You're working for a company that runs sweatshops in China.
Yeah, and it's a company that basically anything goes wrong with their phones, you have to buy a new part. Nothing's recyclable, and they're always charging you through the nose. I mean, they're just, people like worship Apple, but we need to stop worshiping companies like this, and we need to. I think
worshipping is always bad.
Yeah,
I used to be an Apple fanboy when I was young. Like I was one of those guys who got mad if you I don't know, insulted Apple or something. I took it personally. You know, one of those. It was a long time ago, 20 years ago or so.
Well, I can understand. I mean, they were great for designers and people. They do certain things better.
And I must say, like, they're very good, much better than most other companies. But they're still a big company. Like they're a
massive company.
Exactly.
Their phones, their batteries have always been terrible in their phones. Their cameras have never been really very good compared to other phones, and everyone says their design is great. And I don't know. Seriously, I think it's more marketing than anything else. But again, in terms of their, I can see you've got a lovely Apple, whatever it is there in front of you. But in terms of, you know, laptops and things like that, that's probably where they're better. But in terms of phones, which is where they make all their money now, really.
I think they're very good on the privacy thing. That's, I think, the biggest distinction now that you can get probably.
Possibly. Maybe that's what people are paying for.
But I'm not being paid by Apple, so whatever.
Yeah, there you go. But if they want to sponsor you, and if they want to sponsor my shows, well, right. I'm still a hypocrite enough to take Tim Cook's money if he offers it. So if he's out there.
Whenever he wants.
Yeah.
So, I mentioned your blog before. So what's I saw that your blog is a bit mixed about your travels, a bit about government stuff. You used to work for the government, you said.
I worked
back
for
in the UK?
for the UK government for a couple of years. So I worked for the Ministry of Justice, and I worked for the Department for the Environment. So both really interesting, and actually also because I started working for them really just after the Brexit vote. So, working for the UK government in the last few years has been an incredibly interesting sort of, I would say, period in the last 30 or 40 years, because Brexit changed everything. I mean, all resources that were in some way being, within the civil service.
We're almost there, right? Like, isn't the Brexit in like 11 days or so?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, but it's, we're only at the beginning, because now they leave, but there's all these extra things they have to do.
So what's actually going to happen now? What's going to happen on the 1st of February exactly? Nothing's going to change, right?
Nothing's going to change at the moment, because I think there's like that little period, isn't there, for the next year before they definitively there's I think is it the 31st of December? I can't remember.
So I guess if you want to go on holiday to London for just a day trip, now is a good time this year to do that.
I think it's
before things change, become a pain in the arse, and you have to get a visa or something.
I doubt you'll have to get a visa to go to London. I mean,
wasn't the whole deal that they kind of
they'll say all that kind of stuff, but seriously, I mean, that's that would kill London. I mean, London is an international city, and also remember that London is the financial capital of the world. Really, it's still the major city where all banks sort of pass their money through London. So I think that London will remain important for that, but at the same time, it won't ever be the size. The hub won't ever be the size that it was before, because everyone's moving summer operations to other European cities, including Dublin, but Frankfurt, Paris, Amsterdam.
I heard there was a huge exodus already of many companies leaving London.
I think, but I think
was it more overblown in the media?
I think it might be more overblown, because I think what happens is certainly a lot of the banks, they're moving part of their operations, but they're still leaving bits in London. So they might call them non-essential stuff. They move out of London, and then essential stuff they'll kind of leave in London. Because a lot of the big banks decided to bring everything. They had all their admin there and things which didn't necessarily need to be in London.
Right.
It was really the economists and the data scientists and the computer experts and things like that, the mathematicians, because that's banking, a lot of it is just about working out the fractions and seconds and things like that, and getting the information before everybody else and being able to make a decision on it. So those sort of functions will remain in London, as far as I can tell, but not necessarily exclusively. So some of those functions might be in other places as well. But a lot of the non-exclusive things, like, as I said, HR and things like that, don't necessarily admin don't necessarily need to be in London. So companies decide, well, why would I pay somebody £50,000 in London when I can pay them €30,000 in some other city?
Right.
So it's a cost thing as well. They did it before because that, well, we're making so much money, who cares? But now, being in London, it's even higher costs as well, because it's no longer going to be in the European Union. So, and I don't know what the exact relationship in terms of banking will be between European Union banks, and because UK is leaving the single market, and the single market had different freedoms, including freedom of movement, but freedom also of capital.
Right.
So I don't know how that will affect, because these are the things that the future relationship has not necessarily been decided yet. So it's still, so when people say Brexit will be done on 31st of January, in fact, nothing practically has been done on the 31st of January. The decision to leave becomes final then, but then you have to actually decide what the future relationship will be like, which I think that's going to be the more difficult part of it. So
we talked about it a bit before. If you heard about the Big Ben, they're trying to reinvest millions of pounds, in that case, into the restructuring, repairing the whole thing, so they can actually ring the bells of the Big Ben on the day of the Brexit. What do you think about that?
But just think it's a load of nonsense, really, isn't it?
It sounds like a lot of nonsense.
It's like, give us our blue passport.
Every time things get ridiculous, they make it even more ridiculous.
Well, of course, yeah.
I mean, as I said before, if not real lives were at stake there, real people's incomes and real hardships and stories behind the whole thing, this is like all hilarious.
But a lot
to
of
watch.
Brexit,
Like Donald
that's what
Trump,
been
it's hilarious
about.
to watch.
It's all about bravado, and it's very funny. And there's a very strong right wing press in the UK who supports all of this, and winds people up, and many people are struggling in the UK. And when they hear these people, they think, well, maybe they're going to be better than what's been before, because things haven't been going well for the last 30 or 40 years for me. And I can understand that. I mean, if you look like from my current work for the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, for a couple of years, I worked on a report which is basically the state of food security in the world.
Okay.
And the UK is really, really bad in terms of Western Europe, shall we say.
Yeah.
So there are literally millions of people in the UK who are suffering from food insecurity, and some from severe food insecurity. So people think, oh, it's a really rich country, but there's huge pockets of the UK where people are severely struggling.
I mean, they're importing also most of the food, right?
And you can think after Brexit, if the UK is outside of the single market, and also it's outside of the customs union, and they start having to put sort of customs, 10%, customs charge or whatever. I don't know. Depends. This is, again, all this stuff has to be worked out.
Right.
But if there's some sort of trade war, say, it's going to become more expensive to import food. And who's going to really suffer that? It's not going to be the very rich who are going to suffer, because they'll still be able to access food. But the poor people who are already struggling often to access food, they will struggle even more. And I think that's the real shame. I mean, you never hear about this in terms of Brexit debates. Blue passports and Big Ben, he's going to ring for... That's all nonsense. That's all bollocks. And that's what... as somebody who worked also in the UK government, I would say that I thought the UK civil service is really amazing, in many ways, and they're really supportive, and they are. It's very much whoever's in government, you have to accept it, whether you voted Labour, whether you voted for Conservatives. If it's a Conservative government or a Labour government, you have to help them implement their manifesto. Right. That's your job, basically, as a civil servant. But often it's not clear what they want, because the manifestos aren't clear. Or, for instance, when Theresa May was Prime Minister, which is when I was working in the UK Civil Service, she didn't have a majority. So if you don't have a majority, essentially that means you have to compromise, because you need other parties to help prop you up. So your manifesto itself it's not 100% manifesto to implement anymore. So as a civil servant, you're asking, well, which bits of it do we have to implement, and which bits don't we have to implement, and how do we do these things? Because a lot of the things that they wanted to do in terms of Brexit, simply, it wasn't clear.
But why is it that government always has to be so confusing, so complicated, and so dysfunctional?
Because you get elected on sound bites, but then you actually have to think, well, how do we achieve that? And often it's not clear. Like the whole border situation in Northern Ireland, they never Theresa May's government just couldn't square that circle. And what Boris Johnson then said ultimately was, oh, fuck Northern Ireland.
So what's going to happen there now?
Well, now
what's the latest?
Technically, the idea is that the border will be in the Irish Sea. So Northern Ireland, for to all intents and purposes, will be in a common area with the Republic of Ireland, which is not obviously what the Unionists.
How do the people feel about it that live there?
Well, a lot of the people who were Unionists, so who feel British in Northern Ireland, weren't happy about that. But then the Democratic Unionist Party, they had the cards, you see, but they overplayed their hand because they knew that Theresa May was not going to be Prime Minister forever. So they could push her up to a certain point, and they could have accepted her deal, which would have kept Northern Ireland in the same customs arrangement as the rest of the United Kingdom. But they didn't, because they thought they could get more. And it totally backfired. I mean, if I were a unionist in Northern Ireland, I don't know how you can vote for the DUP anymore. So they sold you down the river, basically.
So if they get reintegrated, basically, it means that they become part of Ireland, whether they like it or not.
Well, technically speaking, they're still part of the UK, but in terms of their customs area, there's an exception made for them. So the customs arrangement now will be down the Irish Sea. So they would have a common customs regime with the rest of Ireland, but they're technically part of the UK. I'm not an expert in these kind of things.
Okay, but what's going to stop me then being smart, seeing like the holes in the system, like being a smart ass, like I'm going to sell Italian macarons, go to Dublin, which is within the European Union, and then from there just ship them to Northern Ireland, which is now part of the UK.
Drive up to Northern Ireland, yeah.
And then there's no border anymore.
Yes, but this is the point. The checks will have to be somewhere. So they're talking about on the port, around the ports or along the sea.
But ports are impossible, as we know from Naples, where the drugs come in. Like ports, it's impossible to control ports.
So, but this is the point, and this is great that you're saying this kind of stuff. And this is only the beginning, because they are like, oh no, we have technology. Technology is going to be great, and this is one of the great Boris Johnson bullshit things. It's like, oh, technology will solve everything. Trump is, we have technology. Well, what specific technology for what specific problem? Because you can think of hundreds of little problems and details that might arise. So what specific solution for each one of them? And it's technology will solve all this. That's just, you're just making stuff up that doesn't necessarily exist. And as somebody again who worked in the more digital element of government, very often it's difficult to come up with solutions to problems, particularly if the problem itself isn't well defined.
Right.
What is the problem? What is the specific, or what are the specific elements of the problem that we need to deal with? And usually in government, it's not. It's just a bit sort of generally, and we need to fix that. But what is it you want to fix?
Right.
And I think that Johnson and people like him have never actually got to that point yet. So.
I think you already talked a bit about it, but Lee here is asking, thanks for the question, Lee. Does Shane think Brexit will make a united Ireland more likely in the future?
God, this was not meant to be political, was it? I don't know. I think it's probably yes, but I don't necessarily think that it's imminent. I think we could still be talking decades away. But I think there's probably needs to be some movement on both sides. But I don't think anybody in the South. I mean, I grew up Irish, and I feel Irish, and in my heart of hearts, Ireland is one country, and it's one island is one country. But at the same time, I don't think most people in the South would ever want to return to violence the way there was before. So I don't think anybody would ever push it. And I think it has to be more than just a numbers game. So if there's more than 50% of people in Northern Ireland who vote to join the Republic of Ireland, so we have Ireland again as one fully united country, that's not enough as far as I'm concerned. I think we also have to make it an accommodating place for everybody, even for those who maybe traditionally would not see themselves as part of a united Ireland, who would feel themselves more British than Irish, for instance. So I think we probably need to take slow steps. But yeah, I mean, in my heart of hearts, I'd love to see a united Ireland, but only, in certain circumstances.
I mean, I only see it as an outsider, so I wasn't raised in Ireland or anything.
Yeah.
But I saw a documentary recently, and still a lot of tension there at the non-border, whatever you want to call it. Like I see, people still get beaten up, and sometimes people still die there. Like, the media doesn't talk much about it, but it's still
they still have
at least here. But
what we call, punishment beatings, and
they distrust each other. So
and you have a lot of people who were in paramilitary groups on both sides, who when they had this sort of truce and ceasefire and what we call the Good Friday Agreement, 1994, 1995, but that kind of paved the way then for the Good Friday Agreement was 1997, wasn't it? But it was a few years before that. There was a sort of agreement with the ceasefire of the IRA, and the British government openly was speaking then, even in public. Sinn Féin IRA was going to Downing Street to meet John Major, Prime Minister at the time. So you could see that we were moving in the right direction. But then there's a whole generation of people, paramilitary people, who are used to killing people, who are used to kneecapping them. And, many of those people were a bit iffy about whether they were in favour of this process or not. And suddenly there's peace and we're all happy and lovely again and just go out and do the garden kind of thing. Those people remain what they are. They're hardened, So a lot of those people never really accepted the way that things went. So it's always been sort of an easy truce, if you like.
I mean,
I think it's much better than it was before.
Mm-hmm.
But you always need to have positive movement, because if there's no movement, then people will sort of go, well, maybe nothing's really happened in the last 20 years. Maybe it was better the way it was before, when we were still fighting for the cause, or whatever they want to call. So you've always got to be aware about these things. I mean, the idea that, it'll be fine and we won't go back to that, that's over now. I don't think you can ever take those things for granted. And I think that, again, that's the kind of Boris Johnson sort of thought, it'll be fine, we won't go back to that. How do you know? I mean,
what shocked me the most in the documentary I saw was there were like young kids that were actively provoking the police.
Oh yeah, they call it recreational.
Like
riding.
they don't even know what it was like in the old days. So they don't have, like, say there's like these old maybe paramilitary soldiers, whatever, they know and they live through it, and maybe they also have personal grievings, whatever. And okay, but the young kids, why is this happening? It doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, because Northern Ireland, there's still parts of it, where there's a lot of poverty as well, So and opportunities aren't great in certain parts of it too. So there's still old wounds. It takes a long time, and we were talking only since the 1990s, really, that the progress has been made. But then there's been no government in Northern Ireland for like about 2 or 3 years, I think. So they've just gone back to the table to talk about re-establishing the government in Northern Ireland. So you can tell that there's a lack of leadership on both sides of the community there. But hopefully we'll see some movements.
Oh well, politics. All right.
Didn't want to get into that, but no.
No, it happens.
No, it happens, yeah.
By the way, speaking of Ireland, did you watch the Conor McGregor fight the other day?
I didn't see it.
Are you into MMA at all, or do you watch
I'm not really into MMA, to be honest.
No?
I'm not. I wouldn't be Conor McGregor's biggest fan.
Okay.
I mean, he's an amazing athlete, of course, but
I heard some iffy stuff about him though, like just a few days ago.
Yeah, well, I don't want to comment on that. But yeah, he's a bit too mouthy for me, Too mouthy, He's sort of he's always talking about himself and how great he is, and but I think he's kind of he's out of the Trump school, The more he mouths himself, he doesn't actually. I don't think he actually really cares if he loses a fight. As long as he makes a lot of money.
How much money he makes it anyway,
Exactly, yeah. And, in some ways I admire him because he changed weights. He fought against guys who were heavier than him. He went and fought Mayweather, and obviously he was well beaten by him, but he wasn't, he wasn't totally destroyed by him either,
No,
Mayweather
he's a great athlete, absolutely.
Has basically knocked the hell out of people who are considered better boxers than Conor McGregor. So he's got a bit of courage about him, that's for sure. So there's elements of him that I do really respect, but I think at the end of the day he's a bit too flash, and I think really at the end of the day for him it's about the money.
I mean, I guess probably the money definitely is a big motivator in the whole thing. I think also the mouthy thing is, I think trash talking is just a big part of the whole sport.
I think it is, but I think he does it a bit more maybe than some of the other people. But I think obviously the promoters, Dana White,
they love it for sure.
They love it because they know people want to watch him.
And I think it's also a psychological trick to terrorize your opponent. I think it's an old ancient thing that we kind of try to scare our
but
opponents.
It doesn't work on everybody.
No.
And Muhammad Ali used to do that.
It wouldn't work on Mike Tyson either.
No, it didn't, and it doesn't work. It works in some, but it doesn't work in others. So I mean, Muhammad Ali tried it on lots of people. It didn't work, say for instance, in Joe Frazier.
Right.
But they were two great match fights, but 3 fights didn't they have? But 2 great match fighters really, and so it works on some people, but it doesn't necessarily work on everybody. But there's different sports people have different way, like Ibrahimovic, we're back in Milan now. He's mouthy as well, and amazing.
Seems to work for him.
Yeah,
but it's also good. I mean, it
amazing
helps.
football. Yeah, again, and these people, they add a bit of colour to sports,
True.
So you look at McGregor that way.
Right. I mean, if you think of, I don't want to talk too much about it because I'm not watching boxing myself too much. But the Klitschko brothers, for example, they were technically great, and they won, I think, year after year. But nobody talks about them anymore because they were quite educated while they were doing everything.
Yeah.
I think they never trash talked anybody. I think they were quite.
Yeah, but there's some athletes who are like that, and they're great. Great for that, and other ones who are like, always trash talking other people and everything. Like, Baggio, Roberto Baggio was like, as far as I'm one of the greatest players, certainly the last 30 years. But he was sort of quiet as well. He didn't sort of say awful things about people and wind opponents up and everything. He fell out with a lot of coaches, it seems, but I think that's also because of his style of play. It's very hard to accommodate somebody who was a kind of genius in a structured type of team, which is the way a lot of coaches want to have control. So if they have a guy who's just doing things that they're not expecting them to do, then it sort of takes some of the control away from the coach, and a lot of coaches aren't able to deal with that. Specifically if they have a very rigid or very definite way that they want to play, like Arrigo Sacchi or someone like that, or Pep Guardiola. You have to, if you look at Messi, he's a genius and everything like that, but he's a genius that came through a system, and it works in that system, which is Barcelona, which doesn't work so well when he plays for Argentina. Which is why sometimes I prefer watching someone like Ronaldinho or the original Ronaldo, because they didn't come through specific systems. They came through Brazil, maybe played a bit here and there, played a bit in, like for instance, Ronaldo played in Holland, then he played in Barcelona, then he played in Inter, and then he went back, played for Real Madrid. So there wasn't one club that left fully its stamp upon him. He just was, he did things that nobody else did, and he just didn't know when he was going to do them. So it was still kind of give the ball to Ronaldo, have the rest of the team has to be very structured, but then give it to him. And sometimes I kind of miss that style of football. I don't like, or it's not even just football. It's also, if you're putting a play on or something like that, you maybe have an actor, you think, who knows how he's going to say that. But if you have disciplined actors around that person, they think, who will still be able to, whatever way he throws them, they'll still be able to take it. And that's what you have to
talk about before,
encourage.
I was about to ask, isn't it very similar in acting too, that if you have some actors that have very strong egos, and maybe a certain school of acting, like what's this Al Pacino used, what's it called, the method acting and stuff. Yeah, they are very much, maybe have a completely different school of acting compared to the other actors.
Yeah, and I think it's it's the school that you come through, but it's also I like often it's to do with ego. So somebody, you can see that somebody's stealing a scene,
right?
So what do? Do you then try and act a bit more to try and steal the seal?
But how you do that? Act more, like overact?
You can't, and it can become that. It can become that, and then sometimes it works really badly. But when you're talking about someone like Pacino,
right?
If you think about The Godfather, nobody could overact Marlon Brando in that, with the whatever he had in here.
He put what do you call him? It's the stuff that you also use.
The cotton buds, the cotton buds.
There we go.
And he was that was this kind of and Al Pacino really underacts in many ways in that film, and that's why he's so good in it. He really reins himself in, because a lot of people say Al Pacino overacts, but I think if you look at a lot of his great performances, he's really reigning, but because he can really act as well, because he's a theater actor.
Oh yeah,
a lot of these guys are not theater actors, and theater actors are used to sort of hitting rose ed back there, so sometimes they have to shout. They have to project, whereas people who've only ever acted in the cinema, and particularly some cinema actors who are not very good, they can do the scene, they can record it, many different times from different angles, so they end up looking really good, but actually they're not particularly good, whereas really good actors, and they often do this in cinema, they'll set it up, there's a camera over there, for instance, and there's only two people, they leave it, and the scene is 15 minutes,
right?
And there's no cut in it, and that's when these people can act. I don't know if you ever saw that film with Michael Fassbender about Bobby Sands.
I don't think so.
Hunger was called. There's a great scene with him and God, what's his name? Other Irish actor who's in Game of Thrones, Liam Cunningham, plays a priest, and it's like the central scene in the film. And it's about 20-25 minutes long. And it's just the two of them. it's brilliant, and that you think that's acting. And a lot of sort of Hollywood kind of acting, they wouldn't be able to do that.
I mean, a lot of actors they return to the theater then once they did a few big movies. I
think for a lot of them now it's like a rite of passage, whatever. It's almost like they're proving that they can also act legit as
okay.
Who was it? Variety, I think he calls it legit theater, proper theater, as opposed to vaudeville and musicals and things like that. So they can go back and show that they can really, really act.
Okay.
Because sometimes there might be a snobbery, like you're not really a proper actor, you're just a film actor, you're a TV actor or whatever. But actually, a lot of the really great actors now will act in all of those things. And TV actor used to be kind of, you didn't really make it in cinema, you weren't quite good enough. But now some of the best things are on TV.
I really like, he came from the world of classical theater. It's the guy who plays Jean-Luc Picard. What's his name again?
Patrick
Stewart.
Yeah,
there we go. Yeah,
I
really like him. Like you can tell though he has this very noble way of acting about him that kind of gives away his classical background.
There, and it's great. I mean, when I lived in London, I really used to love going to the theatre. So when I originally moved to London, I thought, I'm going to be going to the theatre all the time.
Right.
And then I saw the prices and I think, fuck me. I mean, who can afford to go to the theatre in London, really? So at the beginning, also, when I was working, I was thinking I was tired in the evening or whatever. I didn't go hardly ever. But then I thought, I have to start going to the theatre again. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to live in this city. And then I began to find websites where you could get cheaper tickets, and I sort of found ways to get really great West End shows for about £20. Right?
What websites?
Yeah,
what do you remember?
There's a great one called Today Tix.
Today Tix. Okay.
Yeah, and they have it actually. It works in New York, Chicago, and a few other cities as well. And every day we have certain amount of tickets for this show, £20, and to see a really great West End show for £20, usually musicals cost a bit more, but I'm probably more interested in seeing proper shows, if you like. Not saying that musicals aren't, but for me,
how dare you?
No, I mean, I love musicals as well, but just sort of plays.
It depends on the musical, I guess.
Yeah. But if you consider, right, in the centre of London, so in the West End of London, if you want to go to the cinema, you're going to be paying about £17, £18. So it's the same price to go and see live theatre, to see something that, you can watch on Netflix at home sort of thing. Netflix is kind of, it's sort of destroyed the I don't know, the joy of going to the cinema in a way, even though, I have Netflix, but I still went to see, for instance, the Irishman. Right, the Scorsese film in the cinema, because I knew it was made for cinema, because
Scorsese, of
he's
course.
a great director who directs for cinema, and you can still watch it on TV at home and whatever on your computer,
Oh, you haven't seen my TV yet,
But it's kind of it's one of these things where once you find a way of doing it, and London is like that, everything is so big at the beginning. It takes a while to sort of figure out how to do what you want to do, also at a reasonable price.
Right.
But once you start understanding there are little shortcuts you can take and little ways you can do this and that and the other, then it becomes a much more livable city, I think. But actually, going back to musicals, I did write a musical, which is which is called Leo's Dead Elephant, which I think
that was a musical, right?
That was a musical, yeah.
Okay.
So. But it's quite difficult. I'm not really a musician, so I just kind of sang the songs into a dictaphone, and I sort of figured out, what keys I was, and a friend of mine, John McPhillips, then helped me sort of bang out and figure out what keys I was singing in. And I think John, yeah. I
think so.
This was like, when was it? Maybe 12 years ago or something like that. But I wrote this maybe 13, 14 years ago, which is about Pope Leo X. So I rewrote it as a play, because I thought, if I need to get this properly written down and annotated and all the music, it's going to cost me a fortune. And also,
time.
For me, this is a big thing. Certain things you write, like I knew Maggie and Brigid was a two-hander. It was going to be fairly small stage, and we're going to use things to give it a more of an epic feel, but it was small, and it had to be small and intimate. Whereas Leo's Dead Elephant is something that it has to be big. it wouldn't. It's not going to work if it's small. You know,
Right.
we can start.
It's in the
sort of
name. It's an elephant.
smallish. Exactly. Yeah, but you know, it's something. It has to be something big. It has to be something brash, and you know. So I'd love to kind of get working on that again, and because some of the songs were actually pretty good.
Yeah.
But some weren't.
Yes.
I would say, you know, listening back now, some of them would have to get rid of them, you know, and sort of add a few extra songs. But you know, that's the kind of thing. It's you know, I'm interested in musicals, but like you go to somewhere like West End, and there's too many Andrew Lloyd Webber musicals, and there's too many musicals that are overrated as well.
Yeah. Also, but the most horrible thing they can do is if they take some musical and then make a movie out of it, like what they did recently with Cats.
But that's what.
Have you seen the movie? No. Well, nobody has.
I mean, it got it got terrible reviews, but I remember like there was one that, you know, won loads of awards, which was a Cyndi Lauper one, Kinky Boots. I remember seeing that a few
Boots.
months, yeah. 2 or 3 years ago, and I thought, this is awful. I thought this is really terrible, you know, in the West End in London. I thought, so yeah, and that's why some theatre critics get a bit sniffy about musicals, because when they're done really, really well, they're amazing. But there's some that are just hugely hyped up, but they're big sellers, you know, and you get particularly out-of-towners coming into London for the weekend or New York, whatever.
Right.
You know, they want to go and see music, and not everybody's interested in, you know, Chekhov or Shakespeare or things like that. So it's kind of song and dance. You can sit there. You don't have to maybe think about it too much. The plots are usually fairly simple.
Yeah, I know musicals. Like it's like the generation of my parents going to those things. Usually, where I'm from. Like I was raised in Germany. You know, I was telling you, but I was raised there. And musicals usually is my mother and father going for you know, great thing on Saturday night, and all their friends go there, and so it's.
But that's, I mean, and that's
not sure if that's the case everywhere, but.
Well, I'd say, you know, it probably is, and invariably as well, more women go to the theatre than men. So often, you know, women might push a man to go to the theatre. Whatever. I mean, this is a terrible sort of gender thing to say. I don't know, bad note, you know, but
they're not genders. They're all gender fluid.
I mean, certainly. Certainly in the UK and in Ireland, I know that it's the more women would tend to go to the theatre than men. So, which is probably, again, reason why something like Maggie and Brigid works, is because
it's a great gift.
It's a story. No, it's a story about women. You know, there's probably too many stories about men, realistically, because, you know, it was a male-dominated society, and male writers obviously were the ones who were writing most of the stories. You know, and mostly about men. So there needs to be kind of more of a balance. Although I don't necessarily agree with these things. We need to have a certain amount of female writers doing this, and we need to have a certain amount of, you know.
Oh, that's a horrible idea, because that's trying to get a certain outcome.
Exactly, and it's not about that. I mean, that especially whatever about political programs and whatever that maybe, but.
It should be about free choice, and
the arts can't work like that. Creative stuff can't work like that. It's just wrong all over.
Right.
Which is not to say that the controversies over, for instance, you know, Oscars and Golden Globes, where so few female directors nominated, or none, I think,
or mostly whites.
And mostly
actors.
White people. I mean, that's wrong as well, because that just tells you it's just the Academy is just full of white men who just only look at things, you know, and that is wrong. Yeah, right. Definitely. But I think in terms of just giving money or giving exposure of theatres and things like that, just to people who come from a certain background, I'm not 100% sure that's correct either. You know, I think that there has to be some type of meritocracy, but maybe they can also make the argument that
there should be
people.
Absolutely. I mean, they test this in Scandinavian countries, I think, where they have very they brought out many laws that kind of try to equalize the playing field for men and women, but still more women go into fields that seem to have to do with humans, and more men go into fields that have to do with tech. So it seems to be in some way still that the choice in the end matters too. So you cannot just decide just because we have to be equal, everybody has to have a 50-50 cut with every job. I
Yeah.
don't think that more women want to go into construction just to fill in the other 50% of people who are in construction. I don't think men want to fill in another field for women just to fill in some statistic. It doesn't work like that. I don't think so.
And I think that's
There are many places where we have to work on to equalize the
Yeah.
opportunities and to encourage people from the youth to get there. But I don't think it's a good choice to say you have to be there.
And I think
by force.
that's part of the problem if we're talking about like, you know, post-industrial society in places, not just the UK, but in United States and lots of European, where we don't have heavy industry anymore to the same extent, like steel and coal and things like that. A lot of the men who worked in those sort of industries, when they were taken away, there's nowhere really for them to go because they weren't people who really wanted to work in an office. So, we'll retrain them and we'll put them in a flower shop or something like that. And yeah, maybe some of them would like to do that, but the majority of them were used to hard physical labor and they felt that, and there was a certain camaraderie between those sort of people. They liked doing those hard physical jobs together. So it's not like you can just get them to do something else and, you know, we'll just balance it out and we'll get them to do kind of what were traditionally more female type jobs or it doesn't work simply like that. And when you look for that type of outcome, I think it's always going to backfire a little bit. And I think that was part of the problem with post-industrial sort of Europe, where and if you look at somewhere like in the UK where I was, many of those people who lost their job in the 1980s never worked again, and then their sons never worked because there was this type of industry that those people liked to work in. And for many of them, they didn't see the point of going to university, or maybe they would have liked to go into university, but it was something that it seemed out of their reach. And how do you engage with them? How do you rebuild those societies? And I mean, I think you have to go and start talking to the people first. Thatcher was like, let's get rid of all the mines, let's get rid of all the miners, but you never replace it with anything.
Right.
And if you want to look at why Brexit happened, you have to go back to Thatcher, because that's where it all started, essentially. Those people were never given anything. It was just taken away from them. And then later on you can say, it's the European Union. Look, we have Polish people here doing jobs. But, you know, the people who came in from the European Union are people who worked. And, you know, you might talk about Polish people now, but 30, 40 years ago, that was Irish people. That was Jamaicans. It was Italians. So, you know, they could be talking about anybody, but this thing about blaming the foreigner for your problems is just the oldest trick in the book.
It's a very old trick, exactly. Yeah, I was about to say the Italians have been and still are right now. You know, they are champions in exporting brain talent.
Yeah, and that's it. But I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be able to solve all Italy's problems or in this particular podcast, but
we're not,
or anything else. but you know what I mean. It's when we look at a lot of this sort of disaffection with the European project and things, it's because Europe has been really good for a lot of people, but there's a whole chunk of people that it's slightly left behind, and particularly it hasn't been very good in terms of what do we do in this post-industrial era where we don't really do a lot of coal stuff anymore, or steel, whatever that happens in China or that happens somewhere else. So we're exporting our problems somewhere else. We're also exporting our carbon footprint.
Right.
So it's still, you know, they're making stuff for us, but it's actually on the books of China and the books of some. So that's a little bit of a cop-out too, you know. So we have to think about first and foremost, you know, everything. The solutions have to be for people. So how do we help people who have suffered the most in the last 30 or 40 years? I'm not going to give you obviously the answer to this now, but the first thing is to try and listen to them and see what it is they want and what it is they feel they lack.
Right.
And then there has to be some investment. There has to be.
They have to be taken serious and also have the feeling that they are taken serious. I think that's one big reason why Brexit happened. That's one big reason why Trump was elected. And I think it's also one reason why Trump probably gets elected again, in my opinion. Yeah,
absolutely. Because there's too
that's
many.
My forecast. Sorry, guys.
And if you think of the Labour Party in the UK or the Democrats in the United States, or, you know, Partito Democratico in Italy, where they're all considered sort of left-wingish, but university educated, sort of all doing quite well, like lawyers and doctors and things like that.
So people up there, it's like
it's like
they're looking down on us.
Exactly, and that's a massive problem for a lot of left-wing parties in particular, who are kind of centre-left. I mean, I had this thing. So I was a tour guide, for quite a long time here in Rome as well, and where I had to bring around this I say girl, but she was like maybe 25 or something, and I was around, I guess, late 20s, 30 or so. I had to bring her around, in a private car and everything, show her a bit of the city, and she was telling me that she was on a 60-day tour of 45 countries, business class all the way around and everything. And it was 2008, I remember, because she told me she was going to go and work on the Obama's campaign. But she was a PA for Al Gore. And I think, okay, Al Gore is already talking a lot about climate change and the like at that stage. And I thought, surely he knows that there's a massive carbon footprint here, And this is the point. It's like everybody else should be doing it, but we're really important. So we still need to take private jets,
right,
and we still need to be chauffeured around in limousines and things like that. But the rest of you need to start taking this stuff seriously. And one of the people who really pissed me off, in the last couple of years was Leonardo Dicaprio, when he went to Davos, and he fucked off to go to a party in New York on a private jet. And 24 hours later, he came back to Davos for the World Economic Forum on a private jet. And he is like and he's now best buds with Greta Thunberg and everything. This is where people who are, because I think he is doing good in general, but there's a massive fail there, and people have a right to call them out for it. Exactly. So
it's exactly that.
And this is where the people who really want to be these kind of spokespersons, all these Hollywood people standing up, they're great at making speeches, but they actually have to live it themselves. And we're all hypocrites. I've used plastic straws and done whatever. And I take too many flights, but there has to be some sort of level of responsibility. And these people who stand up to convince the world to behave, they have to make a pledge.
But you're not standing in front of millions of people and pretend you are the moral.
But that's what I'm saying. And I'm not saying this like. I mean, this is another thing that kind of Ricky Gervais, brought out in the Golden Globes. But there is a serious point to that, because the kind of people that I would vote for are losing votes because people think they're hypocrites.
Right.
And the people who think that they're hypocrites are actually right. So, you know what I mean? So you have to understand that. And that's why Trump will win again, and or he may win again if he's allowed to stand again.
I think he will, yeah. I think so, yeah.
Or Boris Johnson could win again. He could be prime minister for 10, 15 years. Because, the people who you might want to vote for, you just don't trust them anymore.
Right.
Because I think you people should all be doing this, but I can do whatever the hell I want. And we've lived through that. And in Ireland, we lived in that, grew up when the Catholic Church was so powerful, and there was hypocrisy related to the church as well. But now, when it's a much more open society, you can find information all over the place, lots of misinformation as well. But you can see how people are behaving and what they're doing in their private lives. So when they go up and start making speeches telling you that you should be doing this, that, and the other, and they're not doing it, that kind of, that gets on people's goat, as we say, in Ireland. It's something that's just very unpalatable.
Did you ever think of running for something?
Not really.
I think you'd be good at it.
No, I mean, I'm interested.
Shane
in
for president.
Yeah, but I think I'm more interested in just having time to do the things I want to do in life. But you don't need to be a politician to make a difference, though. I mean, that's the point. Maybe we expect too much out of politicians.
That's probably true as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they get a lot of abuse, and a lot of it's very unfair as well.
Also, very often we just take off the responsibility from ourselves and put it onto them.
Of course, and also you have to realize that for a politician to have any sort of power, generally they have to be part of a party. So sometimes you join a party and you generally agree with many of its principles, and in a manifesto you agree with a lot of the commitments that they have, but you may not necessarily agree with everything in it. But sometimes you are a spokesman for the party, a spokesperson. You have to be the person that goes on the interview and has to defend something that maybe it's something you don't necessarily want to defend, but that's part of it. It's the compromise that you vote for things that you don't necessarily agree with, but you have to do it. And then people will bring out your record 10 years later and say, you voted for this, why did you vote for this? And that's, that's part of it. You can't, if you believe in the project in general, you can't necessarily say, I'm leaving the party, I'm leaving every time there's a vote that goes slightly against the way that you want to vote.
But if you expect every single thing that you like to be covered by your party, then you should check yourself in by.
Yeah, and that's it. And
you should go to a doctor probably, because it's impossible.
Yeah, and here's the thing as well. Like, it's another reason why I think it'd be hard to be a politician.
It's insane,
because you're expected to have a strong view about everything. There's lots of things I don't have a strong view about at all. So I think, if people ask me about things, what do you think about that? I think, I don't know anything about it. So I don't really know if I'm in favour or if I'm against it. Maybe I need to read more about it. But, you could say that about so many issues. I can't read about everything. I'll never know about everything. So I wouldn't be in the best position to decide certain things. So I think being a politician, particularly a high-level politician, you're expected to know too much about too many things. And I think
but a lot of it is just also the way you sell yourself, like the way you present yourself in the end. And you have assistants who
you could do you can do the Boris Johnson where he's asked the question and he goes,
you are okay.
Actually, I think I answered that yesterday. And he, you know what I mean? He just and then he goes on and then he starts this kind of stuttering thing, which is a bit of a game, really. I'm not sure if he really has this stutter or whether it's just kind of made up. And he starts playing with his hair and, all becomes
seems to work
Boris. It works for him. And I, it's kind of annoying because everybody, like, the thing is, and this is the other thing, going back to what we were saying about people not being idiots and that not liking the hypocrisy. They did this thing in the UK before the election, how much you trusted certain politicians. And the vast majority of people said they didn't trust Boris Johnson, but they still voted for him.
Right.
and that's the thing, because there was maybe 2 or 3 things that he said he was going to do. And you think, okay, we want that. We just want Brexit to be over with. And it was very simplified. And sometimes that's, as somebody who works in communications, that's good message as well, like simple messages.
It's mostly
things
that,
get
actually.
across.
Yeah.
The problem is, if you really care, it has to be a simple message, but also a truthful message. And we're in the age of simple messages where they're not truthful, and it because get Brexit done. I'm sorry, 31st of January, Brexit is not done. But there's going to be all these things. Brexit, we got Brexit done. We got there'll be celebrations going on. Big Ben won't bang or bong or whatever.
Bang and bong.
Yeah, but
Well, speaking of simple messages, where can people find your stuff?
So I have my blog. It's Shane Harnett blog. I should be able to find that. But I can send you the link as well.
Yeah, I'll put it in the description of this video, and it's everywhere.
In terms of, if people are interested in plays, also screenplays, there's a couple of screenplays I have, but began written over the last few years or so. That one is based in Rome, one is set in a boarding school. It's a murder in a boarding school. So if the people are interested in maybe talking to me about certain ideas, then by all means they can contact me. They can contact me through the blog, but they can also, I'll give you my contact details as well, so they'll be able to
absolutely
to get to me that way.
Fantastic.
Right.
Well, everybody, thanks for tuning in live here to the heysal podcast. If you're here for the first time, please consider subscribing. The audio version will be put up in the next couple hours to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Shane Harnett, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sal. Cheers.
Bye, everybody. Thank you very much, Frankie. Bye-bye.